it looked like you were like a top 25 player in the country at one point.
Yes.
So I'm just kind of curious about, how your recruitment went, and like during those younger days, was there like a crazy like circuit you were playing on, and then just kind of talk about that a little bit.
So I started playing basketball when I was 4. It was pretty much the only sport I ever played. I ran track for a little bit, and I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
It just gave me a lot of anxiety. So basketball was like my main thing.
Right.
I think the big thing for me was in AAU, I always played 2 years up.
Really?
So like when I was in 8th grade, I was playing with 10th graders. When I was in 4th grade, I was always playing at a higher age group. I think that helped me a lot. I got my first recruiting was kind of crazy. I got my first scholarship offer in 8th grade.
Yeah.
So that was like, it was kind of a lot for me. Like, I don't even think I was really like thinking about college at that time. I kind of was because some of my AAU teammates were in 10th grade, but for me, I was like, what? But after that first one, it was from Georgia. It was from University of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And they were really close to who would be my high school coach. And they just knew that I was going to progress because of my high school coach and my travel coach. And then it was like, after that first one came in, I think schools, like, I don't even know if some of the schools saw me that were sending offers.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works, huh?
Yeah, like they just started like from northern states in the north, states in the west. I'm like, I don't even know. I don't even know these schools. And so then like 9th grade, I started getting some of the schools that like I was interested in in me, like Stanford and Duke and Notre Dame and UConn. And like, that's when kind of that started happening. And because at that point, my AAU teammates were in 11th grade. So like some of them were getting looked at, or our team was really, really good in AAU.
Who was it?
And it was the Georgia Elite. We were actually like just our own team. We weren't like a big program. We weren't like a program. It was just like a squad.
Yeah, that's tough.
But my best friend ended up going to Georgia. She was a year older than me. I had another girl go to Florida State. But some of our other teammates, we were just really good together.
Yeah.
And so we would face like Nike Elite or we would face all the other big programs, and everybody would watch those games. And then I was the freshman. I was the youngest one on that team. Yeah. So it kind of like just spread from there. My high school team was really good too. And it was my freshman year in high school, my high school team, we had 8 seniors. Mm-hmm. So for me, I just kind of came in as a freshman and all I had to do was play. So it was like, it was really on AAU and high school, my freshman year, I just got to like play out of my mind, and it just kind of like went from there. I always wanted to go to Tennessee. I liked UConn a lot. I was really close to one of their assistant coaches, but I was really close to my grandma at the time, my Nana. Mm-hmm. She would have never been able to make it to any games in Connecticut. She could come to all my games in Knoxville. The SEC tournament was in Gwinnett County, which is where I was from. So for 2 years, they were going to see the SEC tournament. And so for me, I loved Pat, started talking to her in 9th grade and just loved her so much. And when I went to Knoxville, it just felt different than when I went anywhere else. And so when Pat offered me a scholarship, I wanted to commit right away.
What grade were you in when you got offered by them?
It was the summer. It was actually fall of 10th grade.
Wow.
So she offered in the fall of my 10th grade year, maybe winter of my 10th grade year. And I wanted to commit like right away. It was crazy because I really didn't play super well the game that Pat came to watch me. Yeah. I think I didn't score really. I think I had like 12 points, but I had like 8 steals. Mm-hmm. And so I guess she liked that energy. And my dad, he was like, if you win the state championship in the spring, then I'll let you commit to Tennessee. And so we won, and then I committed as a sophomore. And so the rest of my high school years, I wasn't being recruited. I was just taking trips up to Knoxville and just getting to know those players in the program and doing that.
So not that you have to say, but it might have came down to Tennessee and UConn.
Yeah. So UConn, I never got an official offer from Gino. Because I never took a visit up there. Like I never went there. I just talked to his coach Riss at the time. Marissa Mosley was their assistant, and I would talk to her all the time. Loved her. Like, she was so cool. And I had friends that went to UConn, and it's weird because there's that like rivalry.
Mm-hmm.
But Maya Moore was my favorite player growing up, like, well, when I was in high school, and I actually worked out with her a couple of times, and I just thought she was the truth and amazing.
Yeah.
So I loved UConn. She's from Gwinnett County. I'm from Gwinnett County. So like I just really liked her. So Tennessee UConn was never like bad blood for me because I legitimately considered going to both places.
So in women's basketball, is it like those four schools are like just where the top? Obviously now it's not, because I think South Carolina is kind of in that mix now too, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Like, there's a lot more. I mean, like, I think kids now, like players now, they have a legitimate amount of options. Like, you can find a school that has a very great basketball program,
Yeah.
and that has like the vibe that you want, right? Like, South Carolina is totally different than Connecticut, totally different than Stanford,
Right.
totally different than Texas A&M, right? Like, different campuses, different not cultures, because they're all great cultures, but different coaches, just totally different.
Right.
So now I think there's, now Kara Lawson is at Duke. And so there's so many places. I always try to tell players, pick a school, like, yes, for basketball, but pick somewhere that you're going to enjoy being when basketball is not going well. Because no matter how good your team is, you're probably going to have ups and downs, like in practice or on the court or whatever. And so for me, basketball didn't really go the way I wanted it to go, but I loved Knoxville and my studies and the town and you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so like, I still, when I look back on my college experience, loved my teammates. Obviously I had a great time, but I loved the entire experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so still in college, like obviously this is my 5th year of college basketball, so I've, basically been through it all. So I'm curious about your guys, like women's basketball, like what's the preseason like? Like obviously you guys do your conditioning, so like I'm kind of curious, what exactly did that look like at Tennessee?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. We would have like 2-a-days where it's like you're lifting in the morning and then you're running in the afternoon, or you lift and run in the morning, and then you have skill work in the afternoon. A couple of times a week, you do like the team practices. We would always play pickup, which was so fun. Like, pickup in the summers was lit, like the best time. Some of my best memories were just playing pickup in the summers. But preseason was hard. Like, I legitimately remember, like, looking back on it now, I'm like, how did I ever do all of that work? Seriously. Like, it's insane what you put your body through. I mean, we would run, like, in the football arena, there are these big ramps that go up the arena.
Right. Yeah, I know.
And we would run sprints up and like jog down, and we would do that at like 6 a.m. And then you grab breakfast, you go to class, you maybe grab some lunch, and then you go to the gym. So then, like, from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, you're in the gym, and then study hall. And I mean, it's just 2-a-days. Sometimes I think the hardest was Friday mornings. We would go to the turf field at 5 a.m, not 6, 5.
Yeah, and this is probably for like 6 weeks.
Yes.
Every Friday, probably.
We called it Suicide Friday, and it was suicides, but on the football field. So like, it was long, the length was longer.
Yeah.
And we'd be in there just running. I remember the volleyball players would be waiting to like go lift, and they would just be like watching us, like, just in shock. But it's
frightening, especially like the night before, all that kind of stuff. Like, if you do miles and stuff, you like can't even sleep damn near.
Yes.
Okay.
We did this one. We had this was the hardest, not the hardest, but we would do, it was called LZ Expectation. It was my assistant coach, Coach LZ. It was basically, you had to do 20 suicides in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So every minute on the minute, you run a suicide, and that was
we did that at my junior college, but it was 33 minutes. I don't know.
So hard.
Shouldn't be legal in my opinion. So now, okay, you're with ESPN and SEC Network. So I kind of want to talk about how you got there. Like, a big theme on my podcast is like networking, because it's intriguing to me, because you can really do anything you want if you just, find a way to, come in contact with people in the field. And so I'm curious, you know, where was your head at, you know, in your last years of college basketball? Were you looking at, you know, playing pro, or how did you kind of set yourself up?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was so I had a fifth year to play.
Yeah.
So my freshman year, I redshirted because I had shoulder surgery. And then I had I tore my ACL in high school. I had a couple knee procedures in college. And I was just my last year playing, which was my fourth year on the team. I still had a fifth year.
Right.
But it was so difficult. Like there was so much pain. I wasn't playing the way I wanted to. I had missed a couple of off seasons. So like defensively, I could sell out and I could just do everything. But for me, offensively, getting reps is where I got my confidence, like practice and reps and putting in extra time. But with my knee, I wasn't really getting extra reps. And so I kind of just like felt my play and my confidence like just dropping, especially on the offensive end. And I was just in pain all the time, like off the court. On the court, when my adrenaline was going, it was fine. I wasn't as fast as I wanted to be or as, strong as I wanted to feel. But then like when practice was over, the games were over, it was just brutal. Like
Right.
even now, I mean, the doctors look at my knee and they're like, yeah, you need a knee replacement. Like there's so much damage, you need a knee replacement. And so after my fourth year, had a fifth year to play, but had conversations with the doctors. And I was they were like, yeah, you could play your fifth season, maybe practice a couple times a week and play. And I commend any player that does that because I think that's amazing. But for me, I was just like, that's not what I want to do. Like I've had a great 4 years. I feel like I gave my all, and I was working on my master's because I graduated in 3 years. So then I started my master's degree in my fourth year, had one more year, and just in thinking and like you said, networking, I was very close with our academic center, the Thornton Center, and just started talking to them, and they were like, yeah, we could give you a grad assistantship, pay for your last year of your master's degree. And I was like, great, that's, that would be great. I could still stay in athletics. I could finish school.
Yeah.
And I actually, my freshman year, I'm bouncing all over the place, but my freshman year, Maria Taylor, she called one of our online games at Auburn. And Maria Taylor, she does it.
100%.
And so I had shoulder surgery, so I wasn't playing, but I went over and I literally just started talking to her. And this, at the time, she's not the Maria Taylor that she is right now. And she's always amazing. Like we still keep in contact. But at the time she was like, oh yeah, let me give you my number. If you ever need anything, like, let me know. And you know what I mean? And just so I was asking about her boards and her prep. I was just curious. And so from there, we kept in contact. She started doing the SEC tournaments. And so then I would go up to the set. Hey, Maria, I would talk to her. And
like when you were a player, right? Still?
Yeah, when I was a player. Yeah, when I was a player. And so I would go and like on the set, and I'd say, hey, can I put the headset on and can I listen to what y'all are doing? And I would just talk to her, and it's Nell Fortner, and Nell Fortner recruited me. And so just started talking to them. And then every analyst that we had, so like Carolyn Peck, Debbie Antonelli, any of them, I just wanted to talk to them, connect with them, like, tell me about what you're doing. And so after I made the announcement that I wasn't playing anymore, like Maria, LaChina Robinson, a couple people were like, you should try TV. You speak really well. You know the game. Like, you should try it. And I was like, I guess, like, sure. And so the Tennessee media team, they gave me a chance to do Tennessee's online games. And so all the ESPN 3 games, that my fifth year, so I wasn't playing, I was just finishing my master's, they gave me a chance to do those games. And first one was terrible. The second one was a little bit better, and I just kind of like got better with time. And then I had an opportunity to do a game at Kentucky, and it was against Mississippi State. Their analyst like had just called out. And so my former coach reached out to me and was like, hey, we need an analyst. Do you want to come up, drive up and do this game? And I was like, sure. So I drove.
For SEC, or it was for the?
It was on ESPN 3. It was
Oh,
still
okay.
like an online game, but Mississippi State was really good at the time. This is when they had like Victoria Vivians and Tierra McCowan, and they were really good.
Mm-hmm.
The game went to overtime. So if people weren't watching during the regular game, when it went to overtime, people were tuning in.
Right.
They were kind of like, who's calling this game? And they're like, oh, it's Andraya Carter. What? She's doing TV. And so from there, it's a longer story from there, but just kind of went
Yeah,
from there.
no, that's definitely a good example of just going up and talking to people. I feel like,
Yeah.
sometimes people are scared to do that, but you never know like what it can lead you to. So then that leads me into the next thing is the first time you were on national TV, like you just did our game against, Presbyterian. I watched it on replay. You did a really good job. So just kind of talk about the first time you basically saw yourself, on national TV.
Well, so after I did that Kentucky game, I had a lot of support. People were just amazing. And they were like, you need to reach out to, and they told me the coordinating producer at ESPN, they were like, you need to connect with her.
Mm-hmm.
So I drove to the SEC women's tournament. I emailed her and I was like, hey, I would love to meet with you at the SEC tournament. And she was like, let's meet in the hotel lobby. We could spend 5-10 minutes talking.
Yeah.
So I drive there, meet her, and we're talking, and we end up talking for like 30 minutes. Like we're there for way longer than expected.
Right.
And we hit it off. Yeah, it was great. And so the next day, she's invited me to sit in the truck and watch the SEC championship game with her. And she was kind of just like picking my brain while we watched the game. And after that, she was like, okay, next year, I'll give you 2 TV games. And if you do well, I'll give you more if we have any more to give you as the season goes. And so that next year, I did a few more of like Tennessee's online games that next year, like the non-conference.
Yeah.
And then my first game on TV, I think it was Florida. It might've been Florida or Auburn. I can't remember now, but I was so nervous. I was
Really?
so incredibly nervous. Yeah, actually it might've been Mississippi State with Courtney Lyle, who was amazing. But I was so nervous. I still get nervous. I was very nervous before y'all's game. I've been on ESPN before, ESPNU and ESPN2, but still, just anytime it's a new opportunity,
it's a big audience.
Especially with undefeated team. I was so nervous, but from there, and even now, I feel like every opportunity that they give me, I just try to do my best to get more.
Leading into that again is like, how do you prepare? Obviously you're learning as you go, and like with anything, that's how it goes. But like, so tell me about, your preparation for our game.
So for y'all's game, I watched 4 games for both teams.
Right.
So I really did that because like with the SEC and women's now, I might only watch like the last two games. Really with SEC women's, I watch all the games because I do studio. So I want to be able to talk about all the teams. But for 2 teams that I don't know, or they're in a different conference, I'll try to watch as much as I can. And so for both teams, I watched the four games. And y'all play series. So it was kind of cool, like to see how y'all adjusted and stuff like that. And I like that because I can get nuggets from the analysts that are doing those games. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, and some things that they say, I might be able to ask the coach or follow up on or something like that. So I always do that. I try to watch any like media that the coaches have had or the players have had, or I'll try to read any articles because I don't like repeating questions. So like if a coach has already talked about a player, I want to like follow up with something else. I don't want to ask the same questions. Yeah. So I'll try to look up any like media or articles or anything like that to learn more. Obviously, I'll try to read the game notes, but I definitely read the game notes. But if there's something in the game notes, like, I don't know, he like best game, we'll say, was against UC Upstate and he had 20 points. I don't want to say that because the play-by-play can say that, but I want to go back and watch. There's the Synergy and you can watch, sure. So I'll go on Synergy and I'll look up that player, say it's Chandler Vaudrin, I'll look up Chandler Vaudrin versus UC Upstate, and I'll watch all those points that he scored. So then if we bring that up, I'm not saying he scored 20 points. The play-by-play is saying that, and I'm saying how he scored 20
for sure.
Like anything like that, like if there's a dominant player or somebody, I'll like go to Synergy and I'll just see kind of how they do things. And I'll try to do that for like at least the starters. So that I can really, he really loves the inside out crossover, or really likes turning over his left shoulder, or they actually go to him on the elbow way more than they go to him on the baseline. Right. And so like, as I'm watching, I'll probably like write down like, all right, pull up jumper, 3-point shot. Then I'll put a check by the pull up jumper again and again and again to kind of see what they do the most,
Yeah, for sure.
So that's probably.
Yeah, that's a great. So now I've seen, I watched something I saw something with you doing your segments on SEC Network, right? The Doing Work with Drea. How did that come about? That's pretty cool.
That was just like, it's really cool. Like everybody at SEC Network, our producers and everyone, they're so cool about giving us kind of like freedom. Like, hey, what do you really, really want to talk about? Like, because if they're telling us stuff to talk about, but we don't feel really passionate about it, it's not going to come across strong. So for me, they were like, hey, what do we want you to have a segment. What do you want it to be on? And I love defense. Defense was kind of my role almost to a fault when I was a player. Like I focused so much on defense and almost kind of let my offense just kind of slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so and I was like, I want to talk about the players that kind of did things like I did. Like maybe it doesn't come up in the stat sheet, but you're in a hard denial for the entire possession. And I want to show it and I want to explain it. Or things that people don't understand, like you can lock and trail a stagger screen, but she didn't do that because she's guarding a driver, right? So she shot the gap instead. And that's not a statistic, but that's something that should be talked about.
Right.
And that's the stuff that I really, really get fired up about. So I was like, those are the things I want to talk about. And so I'll watch games and I'll send them like the clips that I want, the breakdown and the time. And we kind of just went from there. And it's cool. Like for games, if I do a breakdown, I have to tell them like, freeze it at this time, draw an arrow here, play it, like we'll send those.
Yeah.
But for Doing Work with Drea, I just send them the time that I want. And they literally just trust me to play it, draw it. And they just, they trust me, which is cool. So yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah, that's dope for sure. Okay. So obviously in that role, you talked about the play-by-play stuff or the, color analyst. So in that role, you're in the studio, right? Because, I've watched freaking college basketball since I was like 2. So I have to be a studio, analyst one day. So just kind of tell me about how the preparation for that, differs from the games.
It's different because, and this is my first full year of studio, which is really cool. Last year I did a couple, but this is my first full year and I love studio. I love studio so much. I love it all, like analyst, sideline, studio, but I like studio because there's a little more time and you just have a little more control with what you want to talk about. In the game, you kind of got to fit things in or you got to find the right time. But for studio, for me, the prep is there's, the producer will say like, hey, we're going to do a segment on, picking your top 5 freshmen. And so I'll spend however much time it takes me to legitimately pick the 5 freshmen that stand out to me. And maybe they ask for clips as well. So they're like, or they'll say, like in our last show, there were a couple games. There was Georgia, South Carolina, and then there was Kentucky and I don't remember, Auburn. And so he was like, I want you to do a breakdown of each team. Pick something. And Drea, you do 2 teams. Steffi, you do 2 teams. And pick something they do and send film in, and so you can break it down. So I like Georgia's team defense. So I started watching film on them and found 2 clips of their team defense, sent how I wanted it to be drawn up. We used that in the show. Did the same thing for Kentucky's zone offense. Broke it down, how I want the arrows, blah, 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 send that to the show. And that stuff takes time. I mean, to find it and figure out what you want. And then for the games and the matchups, I'll usually just make like a table, and I'll have each team, and I'll have like keys that I'm looking for coming into it, just as the initial conversation. But then once the games start, so we'll do our first show, what we're looking for, blah, blah, blah. But then once the games start, we're just keeping an eye on all the games, and we're just watching them. And we have the stats up too, and stats are getting brought to us, and we're just highlighting things. And we don't really talk to each other, me and like we will a little bit, but we kind of save our thoughts for when we're back on camera. So it's fun. It's a different prep, but it's so fun.
Not a bad job. So what do you think about like the state of, first of all, like women's college basketball now? I think it's getting a lot more exposure. Like I think South Carolina had like a TV show or something last year. So like, what are your overall like thoughts on just how it, how women's NCAA is going these days?
No, I mean, I think it's great. I think that I just remember when like I was growing up, like in middle school, trying to watch Tennessee games, and Tennessee was really good, right? Yeah. But even just trying to watch games, it was hard. Like you had to really, really be a fan to keep up with players and teams. And now you don't even have to be a fan. You can become a fan because you're hearing about it and you see it. And so I feel like for young girls and even young boys to see strong women, and, there's, female athletes posting in different, articles, and they're doing write-ups and just so many things. Asia Wilson has a statue at South Carolina now. And so just to see it, I just think it's so much easier for young boys and girls to see powerful women and powerful young women too. And to think like, oh, maybe that's what I want to do. Whereas before, like you had to be a real fan to follow. Now it's like you could just catch wind of a player because they're actually talking about her on ESPN or on, and I just think that the opportunity and the platform is a lot bigger. And it was big when I played. We had the SEC network, we had so many things, but it's just coming along more and more and more, and it's exciting.
For sure. So obviously with this like pandemic going on, I'm sure you haven't called many games like in the gym like you like I read about, not just you, but like other, analysts. So how is it like, is it harder? How is it doing a game, from a virtual, office basically?
It's definitely harder. Like the Winthrop game was actually the first game that I've done on site. Mm-hmm. So all the other games that I've done, I'm in Atlanta, but I do them from the Charlotte studio. So like I'll drive up Saturday, I have a game Sunday, I drive back, and then I drive up Wednesday, do studio Thursday, and then I drive back. So I just go back and forth. But it is definitely harder doing it from the studio because there's just when you're in the game, especially if you're on the sidelines or close to the court, you just feel the energy. Like you feel it, and you can, like at the Presbyterian game, I could hear there was one timeout where y'all just started like clapping and kind of getting super excited, and I could hear it. And I could also see Presbyterian and a couple of those players kind of looking over at y'all's bench. That's never something I would get from my screen, right? So it's like little stuff like that, or, when you're doing it from the studio, if the camera doesn't see it, you don't see it. Yeah. So it's, it's hard. Like when I'm at the game, I might see a high five or a coach talking to a player that I wouldn't see on the camera. Yeah. So it's harder, and you definitely have to like bring more energy on my own. Like I'll try to like sit up and try to get super hype when I'm in the studio. Cause a big play happens. I want to match the energy of the play, but it's hard when you're not there. So it's harder, but I'm just thankful that we're still calling games, and at least I get to watch and talk about the players and the program. So I'm thankful either way, but it's more difficult for sure.
Yeah, and just thank God we're playing basketball now, though. Like, but I know. What are your thoughts on like all these women's teams? Well, not just women's teams, but like teams shutting down for COVID reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough. I think it's hard, but when I think about it, for me, from my perspective as a player, like there's just no way I wouldn't want to try to play. Like to be, I mean, I don't know. I think there's a fine line because it's hard too if you're continuing your season and you're always practicing and you're always practicing and you're always practicing and the games keep getting canceled.
Mm-hmm.
That would be frustrating too. I'd be like, well, I'll just do skills workouts and rest my body and wait until next season.
Yeah.
But there's like, I don't know. I think it's obviously very team to team, like how they handle it or why they make the decision. But I think that it's amazing all the teams that are still playing and you're getting tested all the time and you're, like flying in. Some teams are flying to away games the day of the game. They're not staying in hotels. They're not, like it's just, there's so much that goes into it. I just think I commend both sides. Like I commend every program that's decided to shut down their team because I think that's a really hard decision. And I commend every program that is still playing because I know that it's hard too. So, but the reward, the games are the fun part. Like that's where it's fun. So for me, I'm like, if there's a chance of playing games, let's keep going. But I'm obviously not in any decision-making position. So it's easy for me to say.
Yeah, I know what you mean for sure. So what is I don't know if you're, do any work with like AU, like grassroots girl stuff, but I'm curious, what's like the landscape, looking like these days? Because obviously with the guys side, like the EYBL and the Under Armour and Adidas stuff is like just crazy now. How's the women's side of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the same. I mean, there's always tournaments and showcases, and there's, scouts that write up these articles about the players, and there's the Jordan Classic, and there's this classic, and there's so many things for kind of the best to come together and compete with the best. Like when I played, there were a couple of big tournaments. We played USA basketball. That's where everybody kind of like got together.
Yeah, okay.
And then we used to have like Nike Spark training, which I don't even know if they do that anymore.
No, I know what that is, but I don't think they
I don't think it's a thing
Spark
anymore.
with like SPARQ, right?
Yeah. But I think that it's growing. Like it's just getting bigger and bigger. The travel teams and the travel programs and stuff like that. It's huge. I don't coach any teams. I do some skills training like in Atlanta with individual kids, which I think is really fun, but I don't like coach or anything. It's super stressful for me.
Last question. What are your career goals? Obviously you're in a really good spot, but like, what are some things you want to, accomplish in your professional career as a, analyst? I know it's probably a hard question because it's all the same, but.
Yeah, it's hard. I like kind of being the like Swiss Army knife for the SEC network and ESPN. Like if they like last year I did sideline reporting for the G League men's tournament, which was the winter showcase. Yeah, so I did that, which was super cool. But then I'm an analyst for women's basketball, but maybe I sideline report for this tournament instead, or like just I want to be, for me right now, I just want to be trusted to be given opportunities, and that's all I want. Like just I want them to trust that whatever they assign me to do, they trust that I'm going to prepare and be prepared. And I might stutter, I might mess up, like I might mess up in the moment because it's live TV, but I just want to be trusted as far as like my preparation and my work ethic goes. And I just want more opportunities. Like that's really all I can ask for. I want to try everything. So that's kind of like where I'm at. A super generic answer, but that's literally how I feel.
Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. I wish you the best in the future.
Thank you.